I'm here with Eugene Bidchenco. It's such a pleasure, brother. We've had so many nice chats post Jiu Jitsu training in the locker room, and I've been meaning to get this scheduled for a long time. So it's such a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure is all mine.
So Eugene, one of the reasons I really like you is because obviously you're a stud Jiu Jitsu black belt competitor. But a lot of people, they have one thing in their life they're really good at. And you, for me, are the modern Renaissance man. You've had a crazy immigrant story to get to the US. You're a family man. You got two beautiful kids, a lovely wife. You're successful in your career. You have this incredible passion with jiu-jitsu, and you're still hitting it hard and competing in your mid-40s. So I find that so inspiring. I'm a little younger than you, and you put me to shame. So I'd love to start actually with, you've told me a little bit about how you ended up in the US, but I'm an immigrant and you're an immigrant, but my immigrant story is a lot more traditional and a lot easier. Yours is absolutely crazy, how you ended up here. Can we start with that, brother?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I came to United States. It was just a coincidence. Quite honestly, at the early age, I was fascinated with sports and stuff. My dad I'm coming from very heavy, a sports family where my dad was involved in basketball. He's one of the master sports, they call him back in Russia. And so at the very early age, I was a professional. I turned pro actually when I was about 16 years old. I remember back in the Soviet, it was not to disclose how old I am, but just thinking I grew up in the Soviet Union. And one of the things that has helped me was sport. And the way it really worked is I joined and turned pro when I was 16 back in the day. Just for perspective, teachers used to make something like $60 to $100. And I remember my first check was something like $500 monthly. It was just mind blowing, So obviously nothing compared to current professionals. But back in Moldova, where I grew up in Soviet Union at that time, it was something. Plus, I was doing academically quite nicely, and just there was an opportunity for me to receive full scholarship in the US. I was totally happy to come to US, and I did not want to really immigrate. Quite honestly, a lot of people leave to look for a better life. I felt like I was doing well on my own, just through sports, generally speaking. But when opportunity presented, I just couldn't pass up because I felt like it would expand my horizon quite significantly. And, you travel a lot, you meet people from all over the world. It's just completely expands your mind, particularly coming from me growing up in the Soviet Union where travel was a no-no, So I received full scholarship. I came to US, and it was absolute. If you think about culture shock, my culture shock was absolutely insane. Just think about it. First of all, I did not know anyone in the United States. I packed my bag, I just hop on the plane, came out in JFK. I honestly speaking of diversity, I've never seen Black people before. I've probably seen Asian people, but it's not very common from where I'm from. And particularly during the Soviet Union, there was not much, diversity as you can imagine. I arrived in the United States. I arrived in JFK, just a bag. Yes, I did get full scholarship, but I didn't speak much English, and I was completely, I was lost. And the folks that were supposed to meet me, they got stuck in traffic, and I'm standing there on the curb, and I can't even make a call because back in the day, when you're trying to make a call, you have to pick up a phone. You have to have the coins. You have to deposit the right amount of coins. But I could not understand what the operator was saying to me to deposit the right amount of coins. So I'm just standing at JFK waiting for those people that were supposed to come from school and pick me up, right? So I spent about an hour just standing there. And you understand the commotion that JFK is.
Yeah.
First, so I get to the college that I got scholarship from. It was called Uppsala College. It was in New Jersey, and it was not in the best neighborhood. It was actually East Orange. It's a pretty dangerous neighborhood, as a matter of fact. I'm not sure if it's still dangerous, but it was very dangerous. And I remember I got there in September, and then Thanksgiving holiday started. And as Thanksgiving holiday started, they sent this memo. They told us that, guys, everyone goes home. The campus is going to be completely closed. So that's fantastic if you actually have somewhere to go. But me, without any word of English and I mean, a few words of English maybe, and literally like no, I have no friends, no family, no one in the United States, right? I have to leave the premises. So I cut out the deal, like me and this other guy. He was from Africa. I forgot which country specifically from Africa. I think it was Nigerian. I don't remember at this juncture. So two of us asked for the duration of Thanksgiving to be locked in inside of the building. And because they put it on the alarm, so we couldn't even open the windows. We could not open the doors because alarm would sound. So we could not naturally order food and call and order food. So we'd be basically locked up in that building with no way of escaping it. And we had to throughout the Thanksgiving month, everyone through Thursday through Monday, whatever, celebrate their Thanksgiving and they're away. We were surviving on, I remember it was two vending machines. I vividly remember them. One was with sneaker bars and chips, and the other one with just sodas. And for the duration of the week, that's all we ate was just the soda and a sneaker bar, right? So after my first semester, I came back home. I lost something like 20 pounds. My family's like, what, like, we're in shock. They're like, what's going on? Like, it was exceptionally challenging, let's say. But, with time, I kind of got acclimated, but I was just really thrown into into the deep end. It was exceptionally challenging. And I think it's just like, like Nietzsche said, what doesn't break you makes you stronger. So it doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I think it was great for me, for my development as a person. But at the same time, like I said, I was complacent. I was fine. I was like a local celebrity back to where I'm from. And then I just got thrown into the US. I'm nobody here, no language, no money, nothing. And just like you had to kind of start from the very bottom. So when conversations, pop up about, being like advantaged or anything, is like I literally started from the bottom, surviving and things. So like it really helped tremendously to get to where I am. So yeah, that's my story. That's how I came to the United States.
Wait, so Eugene, you had was that basketball? Is that the sport you were playing back then?
Yeah, basketball. I started playing when I was maybe 10 years old. And the way they do it in those countries, in European countries, where you show potential, the first 3 years you start playing, and when you show potential, they will put you in the special schools where basketball is your focus. And then you start training 2 times, 3 times per day, every day. It's like it becomes like your career, but you still go in school. And those special schools, the level of education though is lower because
the focus is on the sport.
No, sport, precisely. So in my school, our parents, there were several other parents that did not want this setup. They thought the kids were talented and they can do both. So I was actually part of the experimental class. And the experimental class where you basically maintain the women were from the volleyball kind of side, and then from the basketball, there were some tennis players. We're put in the same group and we do get high level of education, all the classes, everything. But then you also, from the 4th grade until I graduated, my entire life was every day was 2 training sessions. One starts at 6, from 6 to 7. Then 7, you go to school, was like 5 minutes away. You go into school, you're there till 2:00. You stay after school and you do your homework. And then you have a second practice from 6 to 8. And then for 8, you go home if you need to finish practice. And that was my life. It's every day, 2 practices every day. Saturday was 1 long practice, and then Sunday was off. And that was my life throughout middle school and high school.
That's crazy. So you were a professional athlete as a young teenager, basically, training multiple times a day.
Basically, yeah, that's probably why I'm like I can't shake off sports even if I wanted to, because I feel like throughout my life I've been training this way consistently, and even when I got I finished basketball because I had knee surgeries. I had like 3 knee surgeries on my left knee, so every time I play, my knee would swell up. And you're dealing with similar issues, like what I did stem cells, for example, twice. But looking how I found Jiu Jitsu, for example, is just because I was like, well, I cannot play basketball. I cannot play any other sport where I have to be shifty because my knees would just would just swell up, and just, I know like within several years I would get arthritis and other stuff. And that's why I started running. But running, like, it's fantastic, it's great for you. But I always wanted, I don't know, coming from the basketball side, like it was once you get to a level when you run marathons, like it takes a long time to get to a point when you start even like sweating and challenging yourself. And I was like, man, it takes too much time. Plus, I would like get tired of listening to the music. I would have to switch to books, and like I joined Muay Thai. Muay Thai, though, the downside is fantastic, but any kind of MMA stuff is fantastic. But if you go hard, like you train so hard, and then you want to go like 100%. But when you get 100%, there's a head trauma. I go back to the office. I got a blue eye. I'm like, I got a black eye. I got like my body's beat up. I'm sitting there like, I'm like, oh man, this is horrible, right? So it's not sustainable. And there was a jiu-jitsu coach that would come just twice a week. And I tried jiu-jitsu, and I'm like, man, I can just like actually fight full force, 100% against other athletes and not like, be beat up afterwards. Like, that's fantastic. And that's how I found jiu-jitsu. But yeah, even if I want to like not train these days, I feel like 2-3 days, like my body starts to like earning. Like I just can't. Like I have to do something. It's insane. Like one of the habits that I guess I developed over the years.
Well, that's the best habit to give to someone young, right? They don't feel good unless they get exercise, they break a sweat, they work out. Because I have the same thing. I still, obviously it's for our bodies, Eugene, but I really come to appreciate working out is more for my happiness, my mental health. It's, of course, it makes you healthier, and hopefully you look better and you have a healthy heart. But if I don't, like you said, for a few days, not only do I have a bit more anxiety, or I just don't really feel right, but I'm less happy. And I think you and I are probably addicted to the endorphins when we're young. But I want to talk about jiu-jitsu, Eugene, but let's stick with the culture. So people listening to this probably are from the West. They don't know what it was like living in, one of the ex-Soviet Union countries. Looking back now you're a successful guy in Chicago and you live a very great life. What was youth like, aside from the crazy routine, in terms of things like, I've read about it, where you go to stores, they don't have much choice. It's not like you can just go out and buy it. Like in America, you can pretty much, if you have the money, you can buy almost anything. Whereas, what was it like growing up, just to paint a picture of, like things like going to food stores and just how life was back in Moldova back then?
I think this is the biggest misconceptions when I'm hearing about the new generation leaning towards, the socialism and some aspects of socialism, etc. It's preposterous to me to think that people and it's not necessarily like, I don't want like equality of outcomes, whatnot. It's like, I lived through the socialism, and it's just, if you think about the fact that somebody at the end of the day still have to direct the traffic, as far as be the boss and tell you like how to run the factory. Somebody has to make the parts. So there's going to be people who doing the labor, and then there's still going to be people that need to, clean the restrooms. If you think about like a hierarchy.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what system you're in. The only thing that socialism, I feel like, was limiting is that that if I am a line manager at this corporation and you're a line manager at there. So like just say like right now we have this UPS truckers renegotiated their salaries to like 170, made a big splash. So during Soviet times that if you're on a level X, like say you're a trucker with X amount of experience, you get like 100 rubles a month or something, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. You just know that throughout the country, every person of your level will pay exactly the same thing. The downside from that is that you just don't want to hustle. Like, why would you want to hustle? There's no incentive for you to do.
Yes.
Yeah, they have like a lot of sayings though, like that it doesn't matter what you do, you still get the same check, right? So like if you work in a team and something needs to be done, if you're a lousy performer, like they're not going to do anything about it. It's just like your teammates who have more, maybe not even necessarily ambition, they're just gonna like pick up your slack in a way. Mm-hmm. But you're all gonna get paid the same. It's the same pie. And thinking of the equal outcomes is just, even during socialism, me growing up, there were people that were poor and people were rich. There was, and dispersion was actually pretty tremendous. It wasn't this narrow because you can, like, let's say hypothetically, my dad is a truck driver during socialism and your dad is a minister of finance. Like, you think even if it's a socialism system, right? Do you think they are the same? Do you think family have the same? But no, your family will have personal driver. They're not going to be in bread lines because they're going to send their driver to come from the back valley to pick up the bread or whatnot, drive it to your home. You would have different, like, it's impossible to equate people because at the end of the day, it's the biggest issues that people fighting against in a society of capitalist society here are like nepotism and things like that. All of that stuff existed back during the socialist system. The only thing that takes away the ability to question things. So because you could not question the government, you cannot question during Stalin, you would get repressed. During Khrushchev, you would just be sent to jail. If you were during Stalin times, you could not even make fun of Stalin, right? You guys, like right now, we're making fun of Trump, Biden, whatnot, right? If for some reason one of them slips up, right? Yeah. During socialist time, like you could not make fun of your government, or you get severe consequences. And I think it's the biggest issue. I think the biggest misconception. People think like, hey, like, socialism will bring us to a certain future where there's almost like we're going to equate. There's going to be no billionaires and there's going to be no poor people, and that's absolutely not right. During socialist time, people who did not, there were a lot of people who did not have anything. Those guys that were surviving on very low amount of money. And there was basically the similar outcome. There were the haves and have-nots. Because at the end of the day, the system it's like somebody has to make the decision. Somebody has to be, driving the economy forward. And there's someone who's going to be the doer. And that will always create a divide.
I'm so glad you said that, because I always knew the aspect of lack of motivation and those socialist countries, that the overall standard just tends to be lower than capitalism. I always knew that side of the argument, but I never really thought about what you said. It makes 100% sense. In any system, the people making the rules, the people at the top are always going to have whatever they want. And then you're always going to have people at the bottom that don't. But at least in a capitalist society, you have, number one, the general average wealth tends to be higher. And then you also have the upside, and you can get rewarded for working hard. I think I'm such a self-motivated person, Eugene, but I'm pretty sure that if I lived in a system like that, I wouldn't work so hard. Why would I work so hard? If I don't get more upside, I'd be lazy. It doesn't incentivize human nature. So I'm so glad you said that. What about things
interesting. It's interesting. One point, what people don't understand is that socialism had a lot of momentum post World War. The reason why, because people were, even during when it first was rolled out after Imperial Russia was broken apart, etc. A lot of those people, they had these amazing goals, like you've seen in China. There was a lot of this propaganda, and everyone was just really living, like, wanted to get. People thought their regime change would really bring this enormous opportunities in the future or whatever. So even if there was no capital kind of distribution or stuff that capitalism is famous for, right? Directing capital towards the most productive assets. I think people just had this in Russia, in the Soviet Union, they call it dukh, which is like your spirit. It's like people just wanted to do more. They still had that momentum, and that allows you to work harder. But people will understand that, well, there's nothing else to compensate me for it. There's no brighter future. And once you lose that momentum, and which usually develops in the US, it was post-depression also, right? There was a lot of this industrial revolution, and previously it's just you have a lot of momentum that you carry on, usually after a pretty horrible events that happen. And once you lose that, then it goes down to the basics. It's why would I have to work, when I get paid the same amount of money? And if you don't work, we had police. looking for those people. First, they would be shamed, and they also would be thrown into jail. So like people who are here and they decide they don't want to work and maybe they want to live off of government, back in the socialist system, it was not the case. They were basically like almost like hunted down, and they were at first they were ashamed. They could be even thrown to jail. So it's a it's a hairy situation when you lose that, that when you have that unity of the entire country, and everybody wants the country like to be better. And I don't think we in the United States we do have that unity. So if something like this were introduced, where people like maybe I should work, maybe I shouldn't, but there's no real spiritual like, hey, like we have to get US to the next level, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think everyone has that feeling that like, okay, US needs to, progress, needs to be competitive, etc. in the future. People very, very, I won't say like selfish, but very like a capitalistic. They kind of like, I'm thinking about for myself, my family, where during socialist time, it would be like a one unit. And we want to get somewhere to the brighter future. We just don't have it here. So that thing is this key difference also in between the two.
Right. And what I think you lived through it. It's one thing me reading about. I studied history, so it's one thing me reading about it. It's another one me talking to you. That's why I'm so happy having this conversation. But it's such a good, because there's a lot of very smart intellectuals that kind of push more socialist ideas. And it's one of those things where there's a lot of ideas that are good in theory, but they just don't work in practice for whatever reason. And I think you summed up why, socialism just doesn't work. And over history, the last century, we've seen many countries try it, and it's never, it's never been able to work. So
look at China, right? So China have been like one of the longest proponents of kind of socialism and whatnot. But at some point, China opened up their markets. Their stocks are traded on major exchanges. Why? Because they understand without external capital, being directed towards those causes, it's the system as it was introduced early on, like the social system, the closed system, is just going to cease to exist.
Yeah. When you came to the US the first time, was it always just for one semester, or was it going to be for a whole college, for the whole?
Oh no, it was. I came in. No, I got scholarship for the entire year, but it had to be renewed. So I actually had a snag. It was after the first semester, I came back and I go to renew my visa, and they telling me that, listen, we don't think you're gonna come back, and they refused me of my visa, and it was a scary situation in a way, because first of all, it's perplexing to me because I was telling them, hey guys, like I literally just came back a week ago. Like if I didn't want to come back, I would not come back. And they're like, no, we think you're not going to come back. So I had to do some, I had to reach out. I went to, luckily, my parents had friends in high places, whatnot. And then there was the whole situation where we were able to get me a visa. And, but again, I never wanted to immigrate. I became an immigrant. It's an interesting story because like I said, a lot of people, they come here and they want to immigrate looking for a better life, whatnot, which was not my case. I literally just wanted to get American education and learn the language and come back. And when I was a senior in college, I believe, maybe a year after, I received a letter that I won the green card on lottery.
Wow.
And those diversity visas, and I received a notification that I won green card on lottery, and I applied and I got the green card. So I wasn't and then once I got the green card and I kind of timed it with my graduation, I was just saying to myself, I can come back. I can always come back. But let me see how I do. How can I employ the skills that I learned in college and just try to make it on my own, because I can always go back and ask my parents, to, help me out to get a job and I'll be okay. But I was actually really, really wanted to succeed on my own. And plus I already got the education, and I was just hey, Wall Street, let me get to Wall Street. Let me try to find my way in this world without kind of falling back on my parents. And it's always good if you can fall back on your parents and say, hey, guys, help me out, like get another job, right? But that's what it was. I really just decided, hey, let me see how it goes. And it just kind of went and went and went. And then, the rest is history. But I never came to US with the intention of like, oh, I'm going to stay here.
Right. So was that because you had patriotism for your home in Moldova, or was it more all your family were there, your friends?
Yeah, I think it's more. Yeah, at that time, I thought there was like enough, I guess, opportunity there. Mm-hmm. But at that age, I really didn't think what opportunity was. But as Soviet Union collapsed, and I had some friends that became successful in other areas, whether they went for the progress within their factories or firms, and a lot of my friends became successful. And at that juncture, I also saw the breakup of the Soviet Union as an opportunity. And a lot of people, if you did not get shot back then, they became very famous, not famous, but very very successful, very rich, because if you did have U.S. education, the Soviet Union was thirsty for that Western world. As the country broke apart, they needed those people who were fluent in language, that had Western education, to kind of to drive the country forward, or what was left, or those independent republics. So I felt like whether I'm in Moldova or in Russia or I'm in Ukraine, I would be successful because the skills, because I do have Western education. I'm exactly what those folks were looking for, as many of those countries turn towards the West for sort of as a kind of the beacon of what they wanted to be, as far as the freedom of speech, democracy, etc. Right? That's why the Soviet Union fell apart, because they wanted to be independent. They wanted to kind of have their own future. And during that time, I felt like if I were to come back and having this knowledge that I gained in the United States, education-wise, etc., I could have been successful there as well. So that's why I felt like I could be okay either way.
That's a great lesson for anyone who's younger, or us when we're teaching our kids as they get older, is get the skills and then you can succeed almost anywhere. But you have to just invest in yourself with the skills and the knowledge and everything. But you absolutely, Eugene, you talked about some crazy civil wars that you went through. Was that after college or was that before?
No, it's before. It was 1992. At that time, I was, I believe, like 15, 16 years old. So when Soviet Union fell apart, obviously each individual states, like Moldova, Georgia, Baltic states, etc., one of the 15 states, the nationalistic tensions has picked up quite significantly. And during Moldova, where I was born, although like my parents were born, for example, in Ukraine, so I'm like 50-50 Ukrainian, Russian, like Cossack, basically, as far as like my bloodline is concerned. So it's a mix of people. But the way things worked, those republics, for example, like Moldova, right, which doesn't have much natural resources, whatnot, but the Russian government would send folks from other people, like qualified specialists, to lift up the economy. So, for example, your dad is a chemist in Moscow, right? And they'll say, hey, do you want to go to Moldova? We actually need chemists who's starting up a plant. You can be an average chemist in Russia, but if you go there, we're going to make you like a senior manager. Instead of making 50 rubles, you're going to make like 150 rubles. So you lift up your family and you go to Moldova. But then the year go by, 2 years, first generation, second generation, and you already assimilated there. And for different countries, for different republics, it was to a different degree. For Baltic states, maybe like 15% of Russian immigrated there. But in Moldova, it's very heavy. For some of parts of Moldova, or for example, before the war started, Russian Ukrainians combined were something like 53% of the population, where native Moldovians were like 39. And then once the republic got separated, what then happens is the nationalists saying, hey, we got to get back Moldova and make it whole. And It's just Moldovan language. Everything becomes Moldovan. So it's almost felt like they wanted to make like the not Moldovans like the second class citizens.
Yes.
But where the problem is, if your population is only 15%, let's say, minorities, you can suppress those minorities and you can basically convert them and whatnot. But when your minority is actually a majority, you don't have the critical mass to do so, but like kind of implement the laws and whatnot. And at some point, the part of the Moldova started to push back, saying, "Hey guys, let's do like a 3 national languages in this part of the country," because we have, like I said, about 25% Russian, 25% Ukrainians, and then like 39 Moldovans, and then there's others. So let's make Russian, Ukrainian, Moldovan, for example, languages as like 3 languages, and it's going to have some sort of status. And they're like, "Oh no!" And at some point, they decided to go to war and just take their tanks and whatnot. And it started on my block. So one day it was like March or something, I remember, and there's just bombs start falling, and the tanks and whatnot started to attack the area, which is like a block away from my house. And my house became like a right in the middle of a war that lasted like half a year, right?
Jesus.
And the first 4 days, my mom was pregnant with my sister at that time. So I had one sister who was 1 year younger than me, and I have another sister who is 16 years younger than me. So my mom was pregnant with us, with my younger sister. First 3 days, we slept in we slept basically in the bathroom because there's no walls, so the bullets cannot hit, and we basically were just locked up in the house. There's across the street there was a school, and there's a school right across the street there was a school, like a high school and a hospital, and the snipers would just occupy the positions of Moldovan snipers would occupy the positions right across, and they were shooting anyone who's walking on the street and whatnot. So from my house, the Transnistrian fighters wanted to basically knock down the snipers. So that's where the war was. And we were right in the middle of these exchanges, right? So there's a person who got shot in the stomach. My dad had to come out and pull him out, put in our shed, and he later died there. Then my dad pull the window just like to drapes to see what's going on. And those snipers, they're so experienced. They don't shoot when they see, they shoot on the movement. And the sniper just shot at my mom. My mom screamed at him, like, "Go away." As soon as he turns around, the side of the window where he was looking through, the bullet came right through it and came like just knocked down the entire window. So my dad got kind of scared. So after the 3 days of heavy fighting, and our roof got completely lifted up because they would shoot these Alazan rockets that like lift, basically they try to target a specific area. My roof and house was completely like lifted up. After 3 days, they had like a break. So we got the white flag, and like as a family, with everyone tries to like escape. And at that time, like a few of my friends went to join the forces, but I was still too young. I was like 16, 15, 16. If I was 17, 18, I probably would have went and joined. But we got the white flags. We walk out of the building. And like I said, there's 2 snipers, one on the right, one on the left. And there's bodies, I would say like 8 people just dead right in front of my house. And there was a few civilians that probably wanted to take those bodies away from the street. And then they killed them as well. So there's just body, like 7, 8 bodies. So we walked by, and the snipers were right there. If they wanted to kill my whole family, they would have killed all of us. But it was lucky they decided not to do so. So, and now the scary part also is like you have to walk through the entire city. Mm-hmm. And I remember precisely walking through one of the streets because we would have to escape towards Ukraine and then go to Ukraine, right? But before we get to these evacuation areas, we would have to walk through the entire city. And I remember precisely as we walk in the family, my mom is pregnant, my young sister, I'm like 16, my younger sister is 15. As we're walking, and then you hear the tank is coming, and you hear that noise, like there's a tank coming, but you don't know who it is. You don't know where it's, one side or the other side, and you just everyone who's walking in the street just starts to run. Like, you ever seen like roaches when you turn on the light? Everyone just tries to spread out because you don't want to get shot. So you just, as the tank approaches, everybody like runs into the behind the homes and whatnot and tries to hide. And then you see who it is, right? And so finally we made it on the outskirts. There's a big bridge that goes towards that goes towards Ukraine. And my dad and I put my mom and my sister on one of those trucks, and then they went ahead while him and I were actually just walking. It's like a 16-kilometer walk to the nearest city, to the other city. So we walked, and then as we were walking, there was like a helicopters flying, so people would just come off the bridge, and it's just like, it's crazy. It's like thinking back, it's like you're seeing like one of those movies, and people don't understand like how bad the war is, to be so careless about kind of invoking almost the war. But you need to understand that like persons who went through a war, I didn't fight in a war. But one thing about the war is like, it's that the loss of control, because you're not in control at all. Like, yes. What can you do? You kind of like, you're at the mercy of, attacking forces and whatnot, unless you're the one doing actual fighting. You're just, you kind of like in this limbo where it just can go either way. And that lack of control is mentally, it's actually like, it's something that's super scary. So I feel bad for people like in Ukraine and whatnot, all this like, I would say unnecessary wars that are taking place. It's absolutely insane. I went through something like that already that was going on in Ukraine. So I feel bad for people, but yeah. So
Eugene,
it's not a good experience. It's not a good experience.
No, I'm so glad you said that. There's something where a lot of people tend to romanticize wars, and war is just awful for so many people. I mean, the only ones that seem to profit are the ones that aren't doing the fighting, that somehow can profit financially. But for so many people, so many countless lives, it's just so bad. And what you said is so crazy, because it's right. The reason we're having this conversation, the reason you're alive, the reason your family's alive, is just literally, it's just luck. It's that the snipers decided not to shoot you, because I'm sure, like you said, people were trying to remove those bodies and they were shot too. Like, that lives become worthless in war. Like, there's just a mindless pull of a finger, and that's the life gone. So, Jesus, do you remember, like, now you're older and you're looking back, you've got the wisdom of, being an adult, but did you realize how just insanely crazy it was during it? Or were you just so in shock that you were almost a little out of it? Like, because I mean, I can imagine 3 days hiding in between the crossfire of two people shooting each other must have been so traumatic, just from a psychological level. Like, do you think did you realize how, like, because you've got that thing, like, it's not the same, Eugene, but I'll equate it to the intensity of just before I had, say, an MMA fight, and you have all the adrenaline and everything, but you can't have that adrenaline for 3 days, right? At some point, it has to kind of come down a little bit. And I know our bodies psychologically, we react to trauma. So do you remember like how you were feeling? Were you like, this is just insanely crazy, I could die at any minute? Or you're almost on autopilot where the body's reaction, I'm sure you're getting flooded with so many different chemicals physically, that it probably, you're probably in a headspace that I could never understand. But I just wonder how like, I know it's hard to put in words, but how you were feeling like during those days.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'll tell you that I truly believe that my experience was, softened in a way from me, and not being, and not going under, not getting some sort of psychological, trauma from it, is because my dad was, he passed away, close to 10 years ago now, but he was really in control, and he was a strong like leader for our family. Mm-hmm. And he literally just calm everyone down, and he He understood exactly what he needs to be done, and I'm thankful to him, because at that age, in situations like this, when there is chaos around you, you need someone to step up, and he did, and he calmed everyone down, and that was the key. I think it played a crucial role of everyone remaining calm, following instructions, and the ultimate survivorship.
I didn't even think about that, Eugene, because you do seem like a very happy guy. You don't seem like you have all this trauma. But going through something like that, I'm sure if you hadn't, and I'm sorry to hear about your father passing, but if you didn't have someone like him who took control and he reassured the family, I'm sure that psychological scarring, a lot of people would never recover from it. So credit to you, brother, that you are, you do enjoy life, and it doesn't seem like you're too scarred from living through that, because that is so insanely crazy. And you just reminded me, just before we had this conversation, I put my son down for his nap, and he's 2.5. And I remember he was kind of giggling, and he was looking at me, and he was drinking his milk. And I remember thinking, kids just have this beautiful innocence, Eugene. And my goal as his father is to keep his innocence. And at some point, he's going to realize there's a lot of violence and cruelty and bad things in the world. But I want to push that date as far as I can in the future. And it's it's so crazy, brother. I think in the West, we're just so soft. Like, I listen to your story, and I'm just like, I can't imagine how many people today in the West, not just in the US, but in Western Europe too, they complain about the most insignificant things. And they have these rants because their order was wrong when they ordered their fast food or something, just the most ridiculous things that upset people. And then you think about the perspective that someone like you has living through what you live through. And that's why it's so interesting the last few years with this big polarization in the US, and a lot of people that seem really upset about things like these big tech companies censoring speech, or things like that, or the FBI getting involved in elections. That the people that seem most upset by it tend to be people who like you, who went through it themselves, or whose families went through something in a different country. They're immigrants that have seen these awful, awful things, and it makes them very nervous when they see inklings of things like that happening in America. Because like you said, in a lot of these countries, you can't criticize your leaders. People take it for granted that they can do a rant about a political leader on Facebook that they hate, and they're not going to get arrested that night. But that's a privilege. Like, a lot of countries don't have that. You can't just complain about the leadership in a lot of countries, even today. It's such a good reminder. And Eugene, I don't want to spend too long on it, and I don't know how familiar you are with the nuances of it, but this whole Russia-Ukraine war, do you have some strong feelings about it? Because I'll tell you, the way I understand it is, my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, she's half Ukrainian and half Russian. And she said the situation is very complicated, complex, and she sees both sides, and she cries every night about it. And that's just, it's a nice example of something where so many people, they put their Ukrainian flags up, and they're just like, yes, we're for Ukraine. Let's send them billions of dollars and let's go. And it's just almost in anything like a war, it's not black or white. It's not, almost anything in life is very subtle, complex shade of grays, but having that background where you have some Ukrainian, you have some Russian in you, do you have some thoughts on what's happening, or is it just an awful, awful situation, like you said, with war?
Yeah, it's awful situations. One thing I agree with you, it's a super complex issue. One thing I want, there's several points that I feel like I want to make, but one of them is that there's always, I see on social media, this almost like hate of Ukrainians for Russian people. And they say, well, Russians should cease to exist. Russians are this and that. Right. And what people need to understand is one thing, given my experience, but in general, is that when you're being attacked as a group, it's a great uniter. Everyone is on the same page because you are being attacked, and everyone is like, you become the whole. But you also need to understand that people who are actually attacking, it's not the whole thing that is all of Russians are attacking you. It's a group of people that is at the top that make decisions. Whoever made that decisions did not consult the entire country, did not go vote on it, etc. It's the group of people that decide to do something, right? And that's where the dislocation is. So this, and then when the hate kind of spreads in the entire nation because of the ruling kind of party or people at the top, it's just not the same. I feel like the hate maybe could be just well justified, right? But it's easy to be when, again, like I was attacked and we were all as one unit. It was easy for me to say, hey, like I hate all Moldovians, right? Like, what did Moldovians do? There was probably like 30% of Moldovians fighting for the unit, for the kind of independence of this sub country, I guess, whatever you call it, right? Or this republic against them. But like whoever made the decision, they did not consult the entire country, right? So it's always like one-sided, and it's easy to kind of spread your hate because you are being attacked and because you are united as a country. From that perspective, when you are being attacked, it's easy for you to kind of dish out hate on the entire nation, where, you know, it might not be deserving, like, because I'm sure not every person on the other side feels the same way, you know.
Eugene, I'm so glad
that's
you said
one
that.
thing.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but real quick, that's I've had that same conversation where I don't like the Chinese leadership, but if I'm out and I meet a guy from China, I don't blame him for his government. Just like I'm not responsible for Biden being a bumbling idiot or some stupid thing that Trump says to upset people. I'm not responsible, you know. So I think that's such a good distinction.
Yeah, I mean,
between the leadership.
You're absolutely right. We bombed. You know, we bombed how many countries? And those countries, they say, "Hey, we hate Americans." Well, why do you hate, you know, Lawrence? Why do you hate me? Why do you hate somebody else? Like, if it was up to us, would we be in you know, Iraq? Would we be in Syria? Would we be in anywhere else? Right? Probably not. So that's the thing. But the hate is a strange thing, you know. Yeah, it's kind of like lopsided. And I'll tell you, it's so bad for Ukraine. It's so bad for the region in general, because like my parents are from Ukraine. Half of my family is in Russia. Half of them is in Ukraine. You know, so like some of them in Moldova, Ukraine. Every single time I grew up, when I was little, my grandma lived in Ukraine, so I would go there and visit. Every summer I was spent in Ukraine, right? So, and a lot of families in the region, they're mixed. They have relationships with Russia. They also have roots in whether in Russia or Ukraine or both. So it's very incestuous kind of relationships over there, and between the people, and just kind of have this like drive this wedge. I think it's horrible it's the saddest thing I've ever seen. And, you know, just looking at how many people just died and what's going to be of this country, you know, who's going to rebuild it. And even if it's rebuilt, you know, what shape is going to take, you know. I remember watching this. There was a famous general who was actually assassinated, I believe. His name is Lebed. He was a Russian general. He kind of went against Russian authoritarian regime at some point. So then his helicopter mysteriously crashed. I'm not sure whether it's intentional or not. And he was asked about war, and he's a general. Those guys, they live for this thing. And he said something along the lines, listen, whether there is war and a lot of people die or not, at the end of the day, they're going to sit down at the table and negotiate something, and it's still going to be peace at some point, and it's still going to come to an inevitable end, you know. So if you can actually avoid, you know, in this case, you know, potentially, you know, 200, 300,000 or even more people, young men being, you know, slaughtered, and you can come to a negotiation table and actually do something ahead of the time, that's obviously the optimum decision. So I'm a very anti-war, generally speaking. But as far as, you know, pointing fingers, I don't think it's so one-sided. It's a very complicated war. And just to say, hey, these guys are wrong or these guys are wrong, there's no like a clear cut, you know. There's a number of players, there's a number of interests. If you piece it all together, it's like it's impossible to piece it together. But if you are piecing it together, it's a very, you know, it's not the black and white. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
No, I agree. The more I learn and read and listen about geopolitics, the more I understand how insanely complicated it is. So I couldn't agree more. So you recently had an awesome trip, and you went with your son. I saw you went back to your hometown. Was that your hometown in Moldova that was in the Civil War, or was it in where you moved after? Wow. So you actually went back there. Was that a lot of memories came back?
Yeah, my
That's
mom,
crazy.
my mom lives there.
Wow.
My sister lived there, and I go every year. Like every year I would go, and I would also travel to Odessa, where my mom was born and my dad were born. So I would I would go there, spend time. It's an amazing city. Luckily it's still it hasn't been completely, like, it hasn't been destroyed because the war hasn't spread there. Hopefully it won't. But that's something that is like, I'm just, I'm a dog that, like, this thing just went on in Ukraine. But if you think of it from my perspective, it's kind of like, it's also like I was in a similar kind of situation in Moldova, where most of the Russian part got attacked by the other side without kind of getting to sitting down and like talking it over. So from one side, I'm like torn, like, okay, it's wrong, but I was actually on the completely opposite side of this whole situation, just in a different country, So
Yes.
like, there's a lot of mixed feelings for me personally, maybe more so than some other person, right? Just because I did live through the war, and as it was set up was very similar. But yeah, I go visit my family every year, and when I took my son, because I obviously want him to understand where I'm from. Although at this juncture, he's only 5, he doesn't care about my nostalgia. I'm like, hey, this is where I grew up. You're like, yeah, well, like whatever, I don't care.
But usually, you know what? He'll see those photos in
he saw
20 years.
his grandma.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's nice.
maybe in
But,
20 years.
well, it's so funny as a new dad. It's wild, Eugene. I'm getting flashbacks to conversations I had with my dad when I was a boy. It's the wildest thing how the memory works. But like, my dad would say these comments to me, and then I'll be with my son in certain situations, and I'm like, oh, I remember that conversation, or I remember that trip, or I remember these real long memories buried deep in my subconscious or in my mind, and they come out, and it's real beautiful. And I think if I never had him, I probably would have died, and those memories would have never come back. So it's been really beautiful. And I think one thing about parenting that I love is I appreciate a lot more about my parents, and I think I'm a much more loving person. It's made me a better human. But Eugene, I really want to talk to you about jiu-jitsu, because you're an absolute stud, and we both competed a lot in the masters divisions, and you're a couple of years older than me, and you're going strong. You got your black belt. You won so many big tournaments, and you medaled in the Brasileira, the top tournament in Brazil. You went out there. You're traveling all over the world competing. I think it's so impressive, because so many people, when I look back on my jiu-jitsu journey, there were so many people who peaked at kind of purple belt. They peaked early on. Then they got a lot of injuries. They stopped competing, and they eventually got their black belts, but they weren't the same. They kind of wrecked their body. I'd love to talk. You mentioned a little bit the stem cells, but I guess I'd love to talk a little bit about how you keep everything together, whether it's like daily routines, like massage, ice baths, things like that, whether it's nutrition, diet, whether it's, all the protocols you've done with stem cells. Like, I'd love to just talk a little bit about that, because so many people listening to this will be a little bit older. A lot of them will be in jiu-jitsu. And so it'll really help them, just giving away some of your secrets.
Hey, how much time do you have? I'm heavily involved in I'm heavily involved in the sort of like longevity / supplementation specifically for sports. So I've done a lot of research, and I'm actually it's not ready yet, but I'm actually probably like 70-80% through writing a book about exactly this, my experiences in jiu-jitsu. Yeah, it's almost done.
That's amazing.
It's not going to be like a technique, but it's just, think of it like, I talk to, like, you and I would chat after the class, and I will ask you, hey, like, how do you deal with this? And you'll tell me some stuff. And I talk to a lot of high-level black belts, generally like friends, whatnot, and I get their opinions. And I always thought, like, people always asking, particularly like if you're a white belt, blue belt, you want to understand how to maintain your body, what to do early on, how to advance quicker, how to do certain things. Like, I just feel like there's no one place where it's like all aggregated. So a lot of the knowledge I picked up over the last 10 years of training, I kind of wanted to put it together, just like a good advice book on exactly what you're discussing. For example, like, supplementation for everyday supplementation for competition, right? Which is different. Managing your nerves. Can you even use like certain supplements to manage your nerves? So it's like there's a lot to it.
That's amazing.
But I'll tell you, not being injured is one of the biggest focus of kind of my journey, because I remember even earlier belt, it was just like you train hard, and I'm notorious of getting injured right before competition. I went to Asia Open, and it was a few days before the tournament, and I'm like, hey, let me go to Carpe Diem, one of the top jiu-jitsu gyms in Japan. And just at that time, I would think I was maybe purple. And I started going real hard against him, and boom, I tore my like LCL few days before. So I had to skip the tournament. And after that, we had like a week and a half or 2 weeks of just traveling through Japan. And Japan, you've probably been to Japan. It's like you have to walk everywhere. And on my leg is completely shot. And my wife is yelling at me. He's like, I can't believe you ruined that trip because you can't walk anywhere. I'm like, literally like with a straight leg, my LCL is poor. And I'm like, and I'm hiking Mountain Fuji. It's
oh my
like,
God.
dude, like, what are you doing? Right. Then I went to Europe, and then it was a day before my departure to Europeans. It was, and I was like, hey, let me just go warm up. And I go and I train, and we're doing this drill. And the guy does the coyote guard on me, pulls my leg, tears my MCL. They like literally day before departure. I go to Europeans, I skip Europeans once again. So I'm just like, and it's not the first time. I'm notorious of getting injured like right before the tournaments, or getting sick and fever, So I think like not being injured is absolutely crucial particularly for us being masters, but for anybody, So I actually developed this whole like regiment of what I do, how I do it. And it starts obviously with like stretch and whatnot, but also how I approach every role and everything. So I remember like even changing my entire game. I used to do a lot more pressure passing, kind of head forward, but then I'm like, oh, my neck was killing me, and then my ears starting to like I have to drain my ears a few times, and I'm like, you know what? Let me look at somebody else who is successful without putting their neck on the line, or like getting stuck into guillotines or triangles and whatnot. And then I look at the guys like Nicholas Miragali or someone who does everything like high stepping out of everything, does the knee cut, high step, kind of leg drag, whatnot, and not really put their upper body in danger. So I adjusted my entire game, at least the passing game, not to put myself in those situations where I felt like I could get injured, right? So my game, particularly my passing, whatnot, is adjusted for it. Number two, I don't do any wrestling, although wrestling or judo. So like, I just think the upside of me having fantastic like judo, whatnot, is not worth the downside if somebody is going to just like shoot on my leg and like tear my ACL or something, right? Yes. I just think like I've seen a lot of people falling, like breaking their elbows, shoulders just from the fall. So I prefer not to fall at any circumstances. I don't even wrestle up. So my game is really, even if I play guard, my game is very much submission oriented. It's not like if I see a submission, I go for a submission. But even from the kind of bottom, a lot of people teach like the wrestle up. But, last time I rolled with a friend of ours, Q, right? And I decided to actually wrestle up on him. And he pile drive me into the freaking mat so hard, I almost broke my neck. And I was just like, you know what? Like, that's why I stopped wrestling it up, right? Because it's just not worth it, right? And mind you, I did judo for at least 3 years when I was like 15, 16, 17. So I'm actually not bad at judo. I just think like there's a lot more probability, and I'm a probabilities guy, of getting injured. Like, so why would I do that, right? So when I go and I roll, it's a rule for me. The first 3 rolls I do is with people of like 140 pounds or lighter.
Yeah.
You will never going to see me going somebody who's like 230 pounds is like, hey, let's roll, without me not going 3 rolls, being completely warmed up to go someone to go. So like usually I go and I roll with someone who's smaller, more like doesn't go, incredibly hard right away until I feel my body is completely warmed up. And then I go to the deep end and start rolling with all the black belts, all the tough purple, brown belts, who may be heavier, stronger than me, etc. Right? So I think you got to set these rules, because otherwise you're going to get injured, and it's such a big setback. Every time you get injured, it's like sits you back months, 2 months, sometimes 6 months. It's just you don't want to do it. Yeah. So as far as supplementation, obviously there's a bunch of stuff you have to like hydrate, but not the easy ones, but for the most part, I think I do believe in anabolic window. I truly believe in that, although the science is kind of 50-50 on that. But in order for my body to recover quickly and not feel sore the next day, I do recovery drinks. So I either take there's a fantastic product called Hammer Products, is developed by for those Ironman runners. So there's a ratio of carbohydrates to protein of like a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1. You want something like that, and I drink it within 20 minutes after workout. Besides, obviously, just keeping up on like magnesium, fish oil, all that stuff is a must for me. Every morning I wake up and I'm like, okay, this is for my these are for my ligaments. This is for my joints. I drink cartilage. I drink this. I drink that. So there's like there's a whole regimen for me to maintain my body in big shape. Plus, I listen to my body. If I feel like I'm super sore, whatnot, I'm not one of those guys because Cavaliers just say, I need to train like every day and just go there. I listen to it. I'd rather train smart than be injured. Yeah, but that obviously there's more to it. But
yeah. No, that's awesome.
I don't know how much time we have.
It's so funny because if you look at people like you, me, Brad, the older we're all black belts, we're in our 40s. When you start rolling, we're always trying to grab the, like we got some really good, smaller, technical purple belt females. We're always trying to grab the smaller people so we can get our bodies warmed up. We're trying to be very strategic and smart. And I love what you said about injuries, because in order to get good, you need time on the mat. And there'll be like a real good white belt who's about to get his blue belt and he's just aggressive and he's eager and everything. And I always tell him like, they might come to me and say, hey, like, what's your advice for me? And I say, you know what? Keep training and try not to get injured. Try and train smart, because getting injured, you're going to take weeks off. That's going to set you back. The biggest impediment to progress is getting injured so you can't train. So all the things you said about injuries, and even that's so interesting, Eugene, about changing your game for injuries, because I know exactly what you mean. I love when I was competing, my goal was always, as soon as I started a jiu-jitsu match, I'm always trying to get on top somehow and get a takedown. And the takedowns, like now, I don't even like training them because, like you said, you just get so injured. There's a reason that you don't see many older jiu-jitsu guys doing hard wrestling, because it is so hard on your body. And the fact that you tailored your whole game just to prevent injuries is incredibly smart. And I think a lot of smaller people, younger people that play a lot of this upside down jiu-jitsu guards and game, they have so many. I knew them back in the day, and now I'll talk to them and they're like, I changed my whole style. I completely wrecked my neck and my back playing that. So that's another good thing for people listening who are starting out, is don't put all your energy into a game that you won't be able to maintain as you get older. Try to think about your body. You've only got one. And that's why I love people like you, Eugene, because I think you're peaking now as a black belt in your mid 40s. And I want to peak a lot older. I knew people that probably athletically peaked in their early 20s in college. And now, from their 25 years old and onwards, they would talk about their glory years. Back in the day, I used to I'm a slob now, but I used to be amazing. And I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to talk about my glory days. I want to try and maintain my body as long as I can. And it's so awesome. Eugene,
like you said, jiu-jitsu is like it's the beautiful sport, because if you think about like what we talked earlier, right? We talked about politics, we talk about all these other topics, but in jiu-jitsu, it's so pure from the perspective is just it's all based on it's pure meritocracy. It's pure kind of like it's your skill versus somebody else, and plus there's a constant feedback. You don't need somebody else to tell you how you do. You know how you do, because you roll with certain people right away. You're like, well, this is where I stand. And I tell people, like, people worry about their belt. They'll say, well, like, I'm like, I want to get promoted to blue belt. I want to be like, I'm like, listen, like you and I probably will roll with people like I'll say like it'll require like one or two roles for us to know exactly what belt level that person is. Like there's
Yes.
no there's no like, oh yeah, somebody gets promoted because he knew somebody, or like there's some nepotism going on. There's no like nepotism. You might get your belt, but your ass is still gonna get whooped
Yes.
if you don't, if you're not on a certain level. You still got to back it up, and that's why as I got promoted to black belt, I feel like every time now I travel, it puts additional pressure. So for me, so I almost feel like I cannot almost like, hey, like take a month off, 2 months off, forget about it, because I know I'm going to come back and I'm going to go somewhere and people's going to be like, oh, look at this black belt, he's bullshit, right? I don't want that. Like it's like nobody wants that. So I gotta keep up a certain level. It's not to be, one of those bullshit black belts where, show up and Jim is like, yeah, you roll this guy's a clown, like he's not a black belt. Like, I don't want to be one of those guys. So that motivates me a lot.
Eugene, that's so true, because you and I both love to travel. And when we travel, we try and, train and get a few workouts in so we can keep going. And there's that feeling where there's so many gyms that I go to, and you just have that feeling that a lot of people there want to say, yeah, we had this black belt that came through from Chicago and I kicked his ass. And they'll kind of go for you. And it's so nice when you travel. And like one of the reasons there's a gym in Hawaii, shout out to Todd's gym in Honolulu, but he's just all the guys there. There's a few black belts, and they have a late morning class, and the vibe is really nice. The energy is nice. They're not trying to kill me. And I'm on vacation. I'm not trying to go to war on vacation, but you can still go and get rolls in. So it's real nice finding those gyms. And I was told when I'm teaching at J school, at our school, I always tell people, like, if we have a guest visitor, especially if he's older, I'm like, don't just try and kill him. If he's from out of town, he's just trying to get a roll in, then he's going to go out with his family and do some sightseeing. Don't blow out his knee or jack up his neck. Try to be a little bit respectful. So that's definitely one thing. But I have that same thing. Unfortunately, you can't. It does become that jiu-jitsu lifestyle they talk about, because you have to maintain it. Because when you do get out of shape, Jesus, it's so hard to come back, especially as you get older.
Yeah, but then at the same time, it's a mental game. So you got to have that level of confidence, because
yes,
your body does listen to you. There is plenty of people at the gym that I like, oh man, like, I don't know how you do this, like I'm too old for this shit. And I'm like, well, how old are you? Like, you're just barely 40. And they're all like, oh, I'm too old. Just like, stop saying it to yourself, yes. Because if you keep saying to yourself, oh, I'm too old, it's like, it's a easy way out, Don't say you're too old. Just say, listen, there are other ways of becoming good. And, and maybe like, yeah, if you're maybe like 60, 70, even then you can, I'm of the idea of like your body listens to you. And if you're going to start saying at any age, hey, I can't do this because I'm too old, that's when you're losing. You can't do that.
Eugene, I'm so glad you said that, because Jay even said something to me a few years ago, because I made some comments like that. And he was like, bro, just be careful. Words have power. And that's so, so true. So I'm so glad you said that. And I'm so glad we have you at the gym, because you have that mentality. I think it's so good. Like if I was in my mid 30s and I started to feel a bit down about, my body's getting a bit older, and then I see someone like you who's 10 years older than me, and he's still pushing it hard. He's healthy. He lives a great life. He has balance. Like, it's very inspirational. And I think a lot of
I'm not 10 years older than you. Stop it.
No, I'm saying if I was 35, like a younger student, yeah, we're the same age, but I think it's really good to have physical role models, and also it's good for our kids to see. It's one thing as a parent telling your kid to do this. It's another thing when they see, like, your older son now, he sees you going to the gym, he sees you hustling, he sees you grinding, and even if he can't verbalize it in words, you're showing him through your actions work ethic. And that's actually one thing, Eugene, I wanted to finish with that, because I always love talking to people like you. You're a few years ahead of me in the parenting game, right? I'm a newer parent. You've been a parent a bit longer than me. One thing I love about you is we've had this conversation where you say life doesn't have to stop when you have kids. You have to outsource the right help, and so you can still do the things that you love. Because if you and I had to stay at home and we couldn't do jiu-jitsu because we're looking after our family, we're not going to be as happy and fulfilled. So we're not going to be as good parents. But in order for us to be the best parents we can be, we have to always put our health first and our happiness, so we can then pass that on. And I think you and your wife do a really good job of that, where you have the right help. And my wife and I do too. We have an amazing nanny that helps. So life doesn't have to stop when you have children.
I absolutely agree with you. I think for me, I always in search of harmony in my life. And I think what you're even like when you first introduced me, you said like, well, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. Because I feel like every person has to find or at least strive to find the harmony. And what I mean by that is, there are several aspects of what's important for that person, right? So for me, for example, family is important, so I cannot neglect that. Kids are important. My wife is important. Then I have my professional career where I also strive to be, the best version of myself. I have my sports career and I also have my hobbies. So if I'm going to start to, let's say I'll take too many projects at home, at work, and then I'm like, let's say I cannot spend time with kids. Then my wife is like, well, you're not spending any time with kids. Well, I start fighting with her. So I start fighting with her. Then my work balance is also screwed up because then I'm like, I'm fighting with her. I got to go to work and I have to be a top performer at work, and I can't. So unless I systematically allocate enough time to kind of help everyone and take the distractions out and find that harmony within the things that are important to me, I think I'm just not going to be, I'm going to be a miserable person. And I always strive for that harmony. So if I pick something up, first I ask myself, well, let's say I'm learning Spanish right now, right? And I'm like, well, I don't have much time right now. But I'm like, well, on Mondays I work from home and I have time between my son's going to bed and me watching, for example, like enjoying a TV along or something. I have 20 minutes. Well, that 20 minutes I'm going to fill with, studying Spanish. And on Mondays, I'm going to have a tutor from this to this time. Can I afford that without jeopardizing the overall kind of harmony and the balance that I created between all those things that I'm already involved with? And if the answer is yes, then I'm going to add it and I'm going to pursue it. Otherwise, you always have to manage that intricate balance and create that harmony, because if one thing starts to lag, is like your kids or whatever, that one-sided success in one particular field, whether it's like your professional career or something else, or jujitsu at the expense of everything else, at the end, from the long game perspective, it all becomes useless, because, well, okay, I became Masters world champion like 3 times over, but my wife is wants to divorce me, and like my kids are they're not doing well in school. Like, have I won?
Yeah.
I don't think I have. So that's super important. So like just having that harmony, and where you don't take too much, then you can actually dedicate yourself to, and keeping everything balanced, because one feeds off of another. And that's why you cannot neglect every aspect. That's why I don't neglect my jiu-jitsu. I don't neglect my family. I don't neglect my work. I don't neglect, other things that I do.
Eugene, that is why I wanted to have this conversation. And that is why I love you so much, is I have that exact same, I'm striving for that exact same thing. I want to be a black belt in life. And if you're a black belt in life, it isn't being, like you said, a jiu-jitsu champion at the expense of these other things. I want it all. We both want it all. And I think in order for us to be our best self, we have to nourish all those different things. So, brother, that's a great place to wrap this up. Eugene, you're such a great guy. Hey, we have to do a part 2 when your book's ready, because I want to get the advanced copy and I want to talk about it. But that's so awesome. You're doing that. It's so awesome. You're learning another language. Like, you really are. I love the idea of the Renaissance man, the modern day Renaissance man. And that's you, man. And that's why I love being around people like you every time I see you. What people don't understand in jiu-jitsu is, it might be the class is 90 minutes and then you go to the change rooms, you're showering. The conversation is just a few minutes here and there. But those few minutes, like when we just have those little chats after class, that inspires me and nourishes me. And I take that the rest of my day. I'm on a high. I feel good. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful that we can share this. And a lot of my friends are listening and getting their kids in jiu-jitsu. Maybe they never did martial arts, but they're getting their kids in jiu-jitsu and they're always sending me photos of their kids. And I think it's so beautiful that the growth of jiu-jitsu, the fact that it's become so popular, like with the older generation, it makes me so happy, because their kids are going to get these benefits, not just the confidence and the ability to defend themselves, but all the social aspects as well. And you're a prime example, man. It's so great that you teach now on Sundays because you're passing on this wisdom to the students. So I'm a huge fan, brother. I really, really appreciate you, Eugene.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate you too. And I feel like our views, we're very much aligned. A lot of times you post something. I remember like one of my favorite quotes is that Churchill's quote, happiness, success is going from failure to failure without loss of, enthusiasm. And I remember you posted as one of your favorite quotes. I'm reading it and thinking to myself, man, can this guy it's incredible. I feel like you're like my brother or something. Like we grew up with having like same parents or something, because a lot of the stuff that you do and post and how you, just approach things, it's very similar to my approach. And I think that's why we connected generally, and just I enjoy your company tremendously.
Well, I love that. As one of my friends always says, Eugene, iron sharpens iron, my man. Here's to many more years of hard training and good health.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.